All right, welcome back. Here we are at Be the Standard. I'm your host, Denny Paul, and I am here, as always, with my co-host and best friend, Mike Burns.
What's up, guys?
Yeah, buddy. So before we get started, as always, please like and subscribe to the podcast. We are on YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble. Also, check us out on Instagram at Be the Standard Podcast, as well as our personal pages. I'm Denny_Paul12 and Mike Burns 1. Also, check us out on LinkedIn at Be the Standard Podcast. Again, we post all of our content there. Go ahead, like, follow, subscribe. Always appreciate your support and engagement. We really can't thank you enough for your input, and we've done our very best to take it all very seriously. Again, red mics, thanks to you guys, and very much appreciate it. So, yeah, today's topic, we're going to start with emotional resilience. And if you're not sure what that is exactly, basically what that is the ability to adapt and overcome in difficult situations. So, what it basically circles back to, anything that you've been through in your life, whether, growing up you had hardships, I certainly did, whether maybe you lost your job, maybe you lost a loved one, whatever the case is. Emotional resilience, it ultimately refers to your ability to overcome those things.
Yep. Yeah, I mean the resiliency, like it's almost like to look at it as your emotional health, right? You're trying to build you're always trying to work on your emotional health, and the resiliency is the biggest part of it. If you're not constantly working to be able to overcome anything that comes up. So
Sure. Yeah, and ultimately, the way to develop emotional resilience is through, you battle through these difficult experiences, like I said, whether it's the loss of a loved one or whatever. You come up with your own coping strategies and support systems. So for me, one of the ways that, I've been able to overcome just, things with my childhood and, PTSD and depression. I talked about that previously in one of our episodes. For me, the biggest way to overcome those things and those challenges has been through the help of mental health professionals.
Yep.
And, we've touched upon it in the past where, as vets, it's tough to get to that point where you feel like it's okay to ask for help. And so, that's always something we're harping on is just understanding that getting help is a strength. And by doing so, it'll give you the tools to help to develop that emotional resilience that we're talking about today.
Right. So, and kind of going back and not to go back to that episode, but kind of reference point what you talked about and kind of go back to where I kind of talked about a little bit and really want to dive into that today is getting to the left of before anything becomes a crisis, before you have an emotional crisis or, mental crisis of any kind, is really being able to work on that emotional resiliency, can't talk today, then, and recognizing, I guess, past behaviors and getting out of things that were taboo before, and then being able to actually be a man, in my opinion, and actually confront emotions. I think it's genetic disposition, it's society, whatever it is. Like we are, programmed coming up even as a kid, teenagers, whatever, that meant we don't show that much emotion, or we're not allowed to show emotion, or you just deal with it, suck it up. You get into the military, or you come from a hard upbringing. That's just the way people are. There's nobody back in the hard upbringing. I didn't come up like you, Den, but I grew up, it wasn't an easy life for me. And you're around people that are just like, you suck it up, you deal with it, and you move on. And they fall into other ways. But then the military is definitely that way. And even the fire service is the same way. I feel like we're getting better in the fire service and definitely better in the military. I think that we're finally getting to a point where we can talk without being weak. Does that make sense? So it's like, before, you always looked at a guy if he showed emotion, or if you ever had a guy. I did a post, I don't know, it was a year ago maybe, where I talked about, I started with like real men don't cry. You know what I mean? My whole life, like you never cried for much ever. You know what I mean? Because you just didn't. You didn't allow that kind of emotional response from yourself because it was weak. And now something I've really worked on a lot since, I would really say, since our deployment. You know what I mean? Coming back home was that emotional resiliency and allowing myself to feel a whole array of emotions. I'm not just talking about sadness or whatever. I'm talking about just anything, anger, really being able to process anger better. And even just recently, really being able to not get emotional in any situation, not let my emotions dictate my situations, and be able to take a step back and really think about that,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for myself, with the way I was brought up and the things that I've discussed in the past about, that I've overcome and whatnot, in addition to kind of the emotional aspects of this, in order to get through some of these difficult things, whether it is, some of the things I mentioned previously, or like myself growing up in foster care and, losing my mother to AIDS and never knowing who my father is, and just, the things that I've already discussed in the past, you have to have, well, there's a certain degree or there's certain personality traits that you need to have as well, such as like, optimism. You have to understand or feel like things can get better. You have to feel like I can get out of this, or there's light at the end of the tunnel, or, things suck now, but they might not suck later. So I think that's important. I think you need to understand or try to convince yourself, regardless of what you're going through at the time or whatever things feel right now, that they can be better.
Right. So I just want to go back to I know we kind of I don't want to go back to that episode, but more I want to talk about the tools, because we're talking about emotional resiliency. What tools did you use? Maybe, I remember you said before when it came to, with your mom and all that stuff that happened to you, you kind of just, I don't know, for lack of a better word, got lucky, but you didn't really have tools yet. Would you say you have tools now that you go to try to build up your emotional resiliency to help you through? Because we know hard times are coming. Hard times are guaranteed, right? So what have you done for tools to help you get through these hard times?
I think one of the things that I do really well with is like self-awareness and being able to identify maybe when things are going wrong, or like I talked about it in the last episode with alcohol.
Yeah.
I was starting to pick up on things that were different within me. And a lot of times you don't pick up on those things until it's too late. And maybe that's just more from preparing or not. Maybe that's just more from getting ahead of having to react to a tragedy or like a DUI or something terrible that could happen. But I think that self-awareness for me is probably where I've gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
And kind of developed that as a tool that I can use to maybe get ahead, get ahead of things.
Yeah.
Early on.
Have you, so kind of more specifically what I'm kind of getting at, like, and this is just something, again, after the deployment, even way probably more recent, but have allowed yourself to feel like, like we're programmed, like you must have kind of hardened up through all those experiences as a kid. There's no way.
Yeah.
I'd be impressed if you didn't, and then being able to, how did you soften that up? I guess, because for me, Anger's an easy emotion. It's an easy thing to grab. It's way easier than feeling vulnerable and sad, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So that's what I did coming up through my teenage years, and it's just so easy to be like, anger makes you feel powerful, makes you feel strong, even though it over time it will destroy you. Yeah. So because I've known you over the years, I've seen you were very like me. That anger was an easy emotion. I feel like you've gotten better with that.
Yeah.
So like the tools, I would guess, and be more specific. Have you allowed yourself to feel more emotion and been okay with that emotion, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've just had to recognize the fact that, like, you don't have to be hard all the time. You don't have to, you don't have to be the alpha in every situation.
Yeah.
You don't have to, even if you are, you don't have to come off that way. You don't have to come off as, I've always tried to come off as very confident and very, like, in control and, all of these things. And I think what I've learned is that I don't need to be that way. I don't need to I don't need to be like hard Denny, you know. And I might actually say it all the time. Like I don't know. We don't always need, you know, intense Denny or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
And I think I've learned that I don't need to be that way. I just need to, you know, just go with the flow of things. And I think something that's helped me a lot is probably the newest thing that I've been working on now for 4 or 5 months is just trying to be kind to everybody. And when you're in that mindset of just like trying to be nice all the time and going out of your way to be kind and generous and, you know, all these things, I think everything else just kind of falls into place because you're so heavily focused on something that's very positive. And when you do that, I think it translates into other parts of your personality and into other parts of your life.
Yeah. I wanted to hit on something you said about being the alpha male, not always having to be. I think, in my opinion, this is how I define an alpha male, I guess, is I think you are more alpha if you have more emotional intelligence and more control over your emotions. I think that makes you more of an alpha male because I feel like in a situation you're not going to be dictated by your emotions. Mm-hmm. I feel like myself personally, I'm just speaking for myself. I know when I was when I would allow my emotions to dictate my decisions, dictate my actions, they hardly ever worked out well, right? And then you're always trying to, just trying to fix whatever that might have done. I feel like more as you become an alpha male or just a male, just a guy in general, you know what I mean? Like you become a better person, like you work on that emotional intelligence and allowing yourself to feel more. And I know I do that a lot now before and it's not like people will misinterpret what I say and I don't care. People might see a post that I wrote and think, oh, Mike's this big baby now. No, it's not that at all. Like we still do our jobs. We still go out there. Still a firefighter. I would still go out to war, do anything we need to do, and still get it done. Yeah. Probably better now, actually, honestly, because and more of an alpha male, way because I've worked on that. If I kept that same mentality I had before, that would have destroyed me from within. I know that for a fact. That's just me. And the fact that I've allowed myself to have that emotional resiliency to work and allow myself to feel more. That's not a bad thing. It's just something we've been told is bad. And how many times have we seen it manifest itself? And probably some of the episodes we talked about is the dependency and the depression, the suicide, because people will not allow themselves to feel because we've been told that's not okay.
And that's the best way to put it. I think you kind of just helped me to better explain it for myself and from my own perspective. You know, I wasn't really looking at it that way, but it's so true. And that's probably the biggest tool that I've been able to implement that's made me a lot better is being able to feel more. And I'm sure you've seen it in me.
That's what I was getting at because I've seen it. I've seen it. I've known you for years, man. I've watched it happen.
Yeah. And I think it's only been the last year or 2 years maybe, that where I've really started to just open up more with feelings, with just being more vulnerable. Yeah. And I think it is those things that creates that emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, and ultimately increases just your overall performance and functionality.
Absolutely.
In everything.
Everything we do.
So I think that's the best way to put it. And you helped me just now to kind of just break it down for myself because I was having a hard time coming up with the best way to describe it. And that's perfect. That's the best way to put it is I've gotten better at feeling things.
Yep. Right.
And I used to, even like stupid things, I used to push away the feelings of a hug, the feelings of like,
absolutely,
from the closest people, and just, you know, now it's like, nah, give me a hug, man.
So how about when you first met me? Like, let's just go back to people that you know me a long time, right? And I've done, again, posts, if you guys follow me on social media, I talk about these things. I feel like they're important because I was definitely the guy. Look at my past pictures. I would never smile unless I was drunk. Maybe you get a half a smile out of me, but I would never smile. It just wasn't a thing. I definitely didn't high five people, and I absolutely never hugged them. Get away from me. You know what I mean? And now, what am I? You know what I mean? You meet me, anyone that's met me recently, I'm like, I want to hug you. I want to high five you. You know what I mean? Like I'm smiling. Like like it depends what mode I'm in. Obviously, if I'm still doing military stuff, it may be a little different. Or but for the most part, that's who I am now. But
dude, you're way different than when I met you.
Yeah, that took years of working on myself. That's why I couldn't wait for this episode,
I've told this story. I think I've told it to you, but I know I've told it to other people where, you were, so I didn't go on the Iraq deployment because I had a tracheotomy. Mm-hmm. And So I didn't get cleared medically. I couldn't go. But you guys were off in Iraq, and the whoever I had for a squad leader at the time or whatever, he was like, Denny, you're kind of like rough. Like he's like, you remind me of Mike Burns. And at the time, I had no clue who you were. You were just a guy in Iraq, and I was just back at the unit in the rear. And like, and so they was like, yeah, you're like a mini Mike Burns. And I'm like, okay. Well, I'm like, I don't know what that means. Yeah. And he's just like, well, Mike's kind of this rugged, hard guy. And I was like, okay, cool, you know. Then I met you, and I was like, okay, you know, because that stuck with me. Of course, then I always was like, all right, I can't wait to meet this guy because I don't know who the hell he is. I don't know what he looks like, nothing. So I'm like, all right. So then when I met you, I'm like, okay, okay, I see it now. Yeah. But then, as I was working for you and learning from you and all this stuff, ultimately became a team leader for you in Afghanistan. I felt like you kind of turned me into like a good leader, but I felt like you kind of made me harder, even if that makes sense. And
that's all you did. That's not me.
Or maybe
it was my influence that did that to you. I don't know.
Well, yes. Yeah. I'm not saying you sat there and were like, Denny, you need to be harder or whatever. Yeah. I think your influence on me was that like I needed to be a harder, tougher leader because I thought you were a hard, tough leader, but fair and whatever. So I was trying to be all those things. Yep. And so I tell this story like, you know, Mike turned me into like, even though you didn't turn me in, I interpreted it, right?
I get what you're saying.
So I'm not blaming you. But I'm like, the way I tell the story is like, you know, Mike turned me into this hard guy, this tough leader. I come back and I stay that way for years. Yeah. Right? And, you know, Mike, he changes into this softer, nicer, guy. And I'm like, you motherfucker. Like,
yeah, and there's probably still people out there that have a problem with that. I'm sure there's people from that watch see my posts that are like, what is this guy doing? What happened to him? What happened to Sergeant Major Burns? You know what I mean? Command Sergeant Major, like you don't talk this way. Yeah, because people don't, especially at my rank, they just keep that. Like you look at their command photos, what does it look like? I'm gonna find the camera.
Yeah,
there's no smiles ever.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So either way, I want to go off on a little just to tell my story on how it all started. Like you're talking about, got back from deployment, and this isn't a plug for CrossFit, guys, but I'm just going to say how it all worked out, right?
Always talking about CrossFit.
Well, when you first get into it, you do.
They can't help it.
I've been in. Stop it. Stop it. So obviously, got into the benefits over there and overseas. Thank you to senior. Well, what was his senior chief IG at the time? What's the rank now? He is.
He's an E9, whatever that is in the Navy. Yeah. What is that?
Sorry.
It's a Master Chief.
I don't know. Master Chief. Thank you, Master Chief IG. But it's senior chief at the time. Never heard of CrossFit. Got us into it. So I saw the functionality. I saw it how it took over. When I got back and got around people who did it, being around the communities, that changed me. That was like, wait a minute. It brought a whole different side I didn't know existed, and that's what just started my journey to be like, hold on. I don't recognize what I'm doing in here. I'm like high-fiving people. Like, what is this? So I knew there was a whole other side of me that I haven't tapped into yet. And from that point on, I was very interested to learn what that is and just went hard into that. And obviously, it you know, and it takes a lot of self-reflection, a lot of work. And it didn't happen overnight. And that's what people who might have seen me years later be like, you changed. I'm like, thank you. I'll thank you. Awesome. I appreciate that. Even though they didn't mean it as a compliment. You know what I mean? And some do. But now some people could never picture me that way. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But even like so when I started my gym, I realized, you know, getting feedback from people how I acted and how I treated people, and I was like, wow, I didn't realize that. And that's why I think I talked about it in another episode. Like that's why I surround myself with people who are gonna tell me, give me honest feedback. Hey, Mike, this is how we see things, and I don't get better unless you do that. And then people who've told me that make me realize how I come off to people, because sometimes I don't realize I'm coming off as a dick. I'm not coming off in a hard way. I'm making faces out of whatever it is till I get the feedback. They tell me, hey, Mike, like this is not cool. And then I'm like, oh, really? That's where I think I've always been kind of good at. I can always take that and not take it personally, reflect, and then change and then grow. So my growth has been many, many years. It really took a lot of hard work, and it still takes hard work. But you know what? I can honestly say, and this kind of the whole point of this is, my life is way better now. Yeah, way more fulfilled. I feel happier. I feel better, and I'm not weak. I know I'm not weak.
Yeah.
You can never convince me because I may get emotional and maybe I have to cry about something that I'm a weak man. I will tell you what, I am not a weak man, for sure. You know what I mean? So, it actually makes me more of a resilient person. So, and it's not like I'm sitting there crying at every little thing and I'm like this, whatever. It's just, if there's an emotion that I need to deal with, I deal with it,
Yeah.
and I get through it.
And that's so important now, and then that's something that I've gotten better with is just showing that emotion and dealing with it.
Yeah.
Because if you continue to just bottle those things up, then you're gonna lack emotional resilience.
100%.
And I think in the absence of emotional resilience, you don't have that ability to bounce back from these difficult situations. And when you're not bouncing back from them, you fall into the victim mentality that was discussed before.
Yeah, it's all ties
a
together.
couple of times, right?
Yep.
So if you don't have, those, personality traits or whatever, such as optimism and the self-awareness and, the last thing you need to be is you need to be flexible.
Yeah.
You got to be flexible because you have to have the ability to pivot when something bad happens. I mean, you're in business. How many times have you had to pivot and make a change?
Doing it right now, man. It's crazy.
It's just those three things basically are the biggest ones: is the optimism, being self-aware, and being flexible, and being able to adapt. Because it's not if, it's not if, it's when. Shit's gonna hit the fan at some point.
Yeah.
That could tap you physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. But it's coming.
It's gonna come, and that's the thing about having that emotional resiliency. That's just a tool you need to have. Like, I'm in a season right now. I've been in this season for over the past year where it's a tough season. It's only getting worse right now, but I know seasons, like all seasons do, they'll pass and I'll get through it because I'm not looking at things in a negative light. I'm looking at things for the way they are and trying to take my emotions the best out of it and critically think of situations that I'm in. Obviously, again, I'm still new to this, so I'm not going to take over the podcast with it, but finding God and really putting it on him has really helped me a lot. And I'm just new in my faith, so I'm not going to sit here and talk about it on the podcast quite yet, but it's just something that's really helped me, especially in the season. I'm hoping at the tail end of the season I'm in. Maybe I'm not, but I feel like it is, and I feel like the tools that I've built over all these years have helped me through this tough season.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not going to apologize for talking about religion and getting back into religion.
I'm not, just so you know, I'm not apologizing. I just feel like I'm a hypocrite right now because I just found
that doesn't matter.
This is something I just found.
Doesn't matter.
All right.
You don't have to be. What do you have to be 10 years into it? No,
I know.
No.
Just
okay. It's new, but it's real. You know, it's real.
Oh, it's definitely real.
So
there's no denying that.
And I'll say that it's amazing to me that the amount of clarity that I've gained just in the last 6 months, 5-6 months of reading the Bible.
Yeah.
And my process is I pick up the Bible, I read it until something resonates. That can be literally one page. That could be 20 pages. I read until something hits me, then I put it down, because I'm not going to try to get 15 different things or messages from God at one time and try to process them and internalize it. So that's what I do. But I'm not. Hey, look, I think it provides whatever religion you are, whatever you're a spiritual person, whatever. Find what works for you, and I think it provides so much clarity, and I see things just in such a different light now.
Yeah.
And then you compound that with, other changes you're trying to make and other things you're working on outside of that, and it all ties together, and then ultimately I think things just get better, or they have for me. I've noticed a huge thing.
They absolutely do. Yeah.
A huge change, rather. But we're talking about emotional resilience, and I talked about some personality traits, like optimism, self-awareness, flexibility. But what do you think the biggest, how do you build emotional resilience? How do you build that? For example, I'd say one thing, we talk about a growth mindset all the time. You have to have that if you're going to build emotional resilience. And then we could go anywhere with this, right? Practicing gratitude.
Yeah.
Just being grateful for what you have is important, and being able to reset and, I've called it out in the past, recalibrate and reassess.
Yeah.
Where am I at now? How do I get to a better place, and how am I able to overcome, many of the obstacles that are headed our way.
So I think just to really answer the question you asked is like, what's the biggest tool? I think is talking. I think is really letting it out and talking about it. I know in the fire service, they try to have like these critical incident stress debriefs, after a major incident. But and no one's ever going to talk. They never do. But it's like with how firefighters do it is at the kitchen table. They joke. So if people ever heard what we say after something, they're like, man, these guys are sick. It's not that at all. This is how they process it. That's how they actually able to put it out into the universe and not feel it's a way for them to talk about it without it being real, I guess, so, and that's where I wanted to get into with this, is that's the between that and the military and just everyone in general, but those are the two hardest places for people to talk about things. And I would love that to change. I would love to see culture change, and it has, believe me. It's not the way it used to be. But I feel like you if you just see the amount of alcoholism in the fire service, you see in the police, obviously, the stuff they see, unbelievable alcoholism, suicides, like, and just the quality of life. Like, we have to really be willing to use our biggest tool. Yeah. I believe is just being open and being able to talk about whatever, anything. You know what I mean? And when that becomes normal, I feel like a lot more people out here will have emotional resiliency for tough seasons ahead. But I feel like if you're keeping everything bottled in, like you said earlier, you're stuffing it down. That's just, we suppress. A tough season's coming. Yeah. Guess what's going to happen? It's not going to go well if you're not ready.
Yeah, and I talked about like self-awareness and being aware, but I think a lot of people, like we discussed, they push those emotions aside in talking about them. Not only tough, but they just don't want to do it. Yeah. It's almost like
it's hard.
It's almost like an alcoholic. Like they say, you can't help somebody that doesn't want to help themselves. They got to kind of hit that rock bottom or whatever. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I'm not putting any, science behind that. I'm just saying that's kind of what people think is you can't help somebody that doesn't want to help themselves. And I can remember, as a kid, I was forced to go to counseling. Well, Denny, your mom died from AIDS, so you must feel a certain way. You don't talk.
Yeah.
I would get like quiet. I would get angry. I would just like, hey, you're not my mom. You're not my dad. Leave me alone. That's what I would say to people. And, I'd be forced to go to counseling. I would sit there and not say a word.
Yeah.
I didn't say one word.
Yeah.
So, Denny, how are things going? Fine.
Yeah.
What'd you do this week? Nothing. What do you want to talk about? Nothing.
Yeah.
Like, and the counselor would say to my aunt, like, he doesn't talk. I can't get anything out of him. And so, it takes you wanting to, or
of course,
to speak to these things, but that's going to be your biggest hurdle in developing this emotional resilience, is dealing with your problems and knowing how to pivot when they come knocking.
Yeah. And just to go back, I really just want to like emphasize, like, the easy emotion is anger and keeping it in. I mean, I relied on that most of my life. And the hard one is going at your emotions head on. And that's probably the biggest advice I can give anybody, just from what I've done, is as much as scary and as much as it hurts, because it hurts, to go at your emotions straight on. Don't sidestep it. Don't zigzag. If you go right at something, from my experience, it hurts in the moment, but you get through it quicker. If you go the other way and you keep sidestepping, you keep trying to avoid it, it's never ending, and you probably never get through it. If you have I would call it the balls. If you have the balls to go right at something, this is like anything in life. Go right at it. Go right through it. It hurts in the moment. It's scary in the moment. But once you're through it, man, you get through it, and it's just so much better on the other side, and it doesn't take that long.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
My experience.
I totally agree with that. The faster you can deal with something, or
be willing to do it.
Just the faster you make the decision to just act.
Yeah.
The quicker you get to the end result,
yep.
Right? And like you said, the more you sidestep, the longer the process is to get better. And that's, I've talked about just getting treatment. I thought when I got home from overseas that for a year and a half, I thought that I was just having a hard time readjusting.
Yep.
I had to go sit down and talk to somebody, and they had to tell me, no, you have issues from stuff. And so, that probably could have been addressed a year prior, but I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And so that's it. The first step is just acknowledging And that's sometimes maybe that's the toughest part even too. Is like maybe acknowledging. I don't know, but once you do, it's time to act.
And sometimes, we talk about it in other episodes, you brought it up, is sometimes you need that qualifying event to make you realize that, and hopefully you don't. So I think you should I don't think you should do anything. If I was other people, I would take stock and inventory and on how you feel in life and really look at yourself, take a deep dive, and then maybe realize you need to do what we're talking about. Maybe not. Maybe you're completely content and you're killing life and you're the happiest person on the planet. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. So,
yeah. And I think just the last thing I'll touch upon is, for that emotional resilience is developing emotional intelligence, right? And that could be a whole topic on its own. We could go on forever with that.
Yep.
But and you did touch upon it earlier, right? Like with just being able to manage your own emotions and understand kind of the emotions of everyone around you or the people around you that are closest to you. And really what that means is just practicing active listening, trying to be positive, and, being able to take feedback and constructive criticism. That's huge.
Yeah, agreed.
And then just, emotional intelligence, I think the hardest part of it is recognizing how other people feel. Because think about that. You're always so tied up in how you feel.
Yeah, humans, I feel like that's how we are.
Natural.
Yeah.
I think naturally, your instinct is to protect self. And I think that, we get so caught up in how we feel that we forget to recognize how other people are feeling. I've made that mistake.
Well said.
And it's caused hurt, pain.
Yeah.
Because, you get so wrapped up in yourself and I need this and I need that. You forget that, it's not just about you. So I think that's very important in, first of all, developing emotional intelligence, and then once you're there, you have that emotional resilience to kind of get over, whatever.
Yeah, well said. I love that awareness part, Dan. That really, I think brings it all together well. Having that awareness of other people too, not just that awareness of yourself, but awareness of what you're saying, how that affects other people. That's great.
It's just because I had made that mistake.
Yeah,
like big
we
time.
all have.
Big time.
I think we all have though.
Yeah,
it's
just important to, the biggest part of emotional intelligence, I think, is that key component is just being aware of what's going on around you and with other people. But yeah, no, that was a good topic. I had fun talking about emotional resilience and, kind of how to get over those humps and the personality traits that are required, and then also, how to build it with the growth mindset. And I think we touched upon a lot of good stuff there. So with that, I'd like to thank you guys all for your time tuning in with us again. We really appreciate the support. We really appreciate the feedback. Go ahead, check us out on Spotify, Rumble, and YouTube. Go ahead, like, subscribe. Also check us out on Instagram at Be The Standard Podcast, as well as our personal pages, Denny_Paul12 and Mike Burns 1. And yeah, also as always, don't forget to check us out on LinkedIn. Everything gets posted there as well. And thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
Be the standard.
That's right.